The Metro series is one of those rare series that will have you hooked right from the beginning because of how fascinating the world and the characters are. The post-apocalyptic setting isn't a unique one, but few pieces of media really explore the post-nuclear war apocalypse the way Metro does. And after all, this type of apocalypse, if we are being realistic, is the most likely to happen in real life. So welcome to the first episode of a series where we will explore the Metro games. If it's not clear by now, we will talk about the games and not the books by Dmitry Glukovsky, so if you came for that, I'm sorry. But before getting into the story of Metro 2033, let's see why everybody lives in the Metro system. In 2013, a nuclear war began in the Middle East that led to multiple nations firing upon each other with nuclear missiles. The outside world is pretty much destroyed everywhere, and if you didn't die in the initial explosions, there is a very high chance you would have died from radiation exposure or the cold from the nuclear winter that began. But still, few people managed to survive by taking shelter in the Metro system. Slowly, they started to build communities that resemble small cities in the metro stations, but still, they would not have a decent or at least a peaceful life because of the monsters that evolved from the radiation. And this brings us to the present in 2033, where the game starts. Our character, Artyom, is a resident of a station called Exhibition, and things aren't going too smoothly in there. The station is under attack by these mysterious creatures called the Dark Ones. Artyom actually has a past with these creatures, but we will discuss this later on. The story starts with Alex, who is our adoptive father, telling us that a friend of his called Hunter is coming from the outside and that he might bring news. The initial walk through the station, when we go to meet Hunter, really sets the tone of the game. You can feel the despair that the people of the stations are living through because of the desperate situation they are in. The people talk about the increasing number of victims that are in the hospital because of the Dark One's attacks. When we meet Hunter, we can tell right from the beginning that Artyom looks up to him because he is a ranger. The Rangers, or the Rangers of the Spartan Order, are elite soldiers that roam the wasteland above. After a brief conversation, we get attacked by Nosalises. These are the most common mutated monsters that you will meet throughout the game, so get acquainted with them. After we deal with them, Alex tells us that the monsters weren't attracted by the blood of the wounded in the hospital, as everyone believes, but instead they were running away from the Dark Ones. So from the start, the game establishes that the Dark Ones are very powerful. And we get to see their power because someone runs in the room with us and tells us that the Dark Ones destroyed the station's guard post. When we get there, everyone is dead. Hunter tells us that he must go after them to try and make some sense of the situation. Before he leaves, he gives us his ranger medallion and a task. If he doesn't come back by morning, we must go to a station called Police and find a man called Miller and tell him what is going on. And this pretty much is the catalyst of Artyom's story, the moment that changed his life forever, because when we wake up in the morning, Hunter is nowhere to be seen. So we set out to fulfill our promise to him. To get out of Exhibition, we volunteer as a transport guard on a rail cart that is heading with supplies to a nearby station called Riga as an alliance between the two stations. During the ride, the Dark Ones attack us and all the crew with a psychic attack that knocks everybody out except for Artyom. After this, we get attacked by Nosalises, but nonetheless, we manage to make our way to the station. In Riga, we meet a man called Bourbon that is a smuggler, and he offers us to get us to Polis. To continue our journey, we must get out of Riga, but seeing that the station is in lockdown, we use a secret back door. We make our way through multiple stations, and we see that Bourbon doesn't have a great reputation because he owes a lot of people money. During our journey, the Dark Ones provoke visions to us, so it's clear that they know that we set out to stop them. After a while, we make our way to the surface, and the first time you see the ruins of Moscow, it's really a sight to behold. During this trip to the surface, we also meet a new monster called a demon, and you can see why it's called that. After some close encounters with some monsters, we make our way to a place called Dry Station. Bourbon gets captured by some guys from the station, and it's clear that they met him before and that they don't like him. We set out to rescue him, but he gets killed in a fight with the leader of the bandits. Luckily, another man named Khan appears in the room and tells us that we must leave before the other bandits show up. He also tells us that he can get us to police by putting us in contact with a man called Andrew the blacksmith. Seeing that we have no other choice, we trust him and we slowly make our way to the station called Armory. During this trip, we see something very interesting. In a very creepy tunnel, we get to see the spirits of those who died there. This reminds me of a real-life thing called atomic shadows. The atomic shadows are the shadows of people or objects that were engraved into the stones when the nuclear bombs detonated at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And these shadows are really creepy and sad, if you ask me, because it shows the destructive power we as a civilization unleashed upon each other. But enough with the history lesson. It also appears that these spirits that we see in the tunnel can be interacted with, as Khan chants prayers to get us safely from a group of them. We make our way to Armory, we get arrested, but Andrew the blacksmith rescues us just in time. But now let's take some time to discuss something about this station and some others. And we're gonna go back to the history lesson for a while. Even though the Armory is considered a free station, it's closely supervised by a political regime called the Red Line. This is a communist regime that is in conflict with another regime called the Fourth Reich. This regime is, I don't know how to call it without getting in trouble with YouTube, but they are basically following in the footsteps of Mr. Famous Austrian painter that is not known for his paintings. Anyway, these factions are in conflict with one another, and there is this really cool voice line from Artyom in one of the loading screens that says that he heard that they fought a war a long time ago as well.
Even the apocalypse didn't stop us from killing one another over ideology. I was about to go through the front line between the Nazis and the communists. I've heard they once fought another war, but the Nazis lost.
This shows that even though Artyom was born 3 years before the fallout, the history of the old world is slowly fading away. The Red Line have an expansionist nature that is somewhat in line with what Trotsky wanted with his global revolution. And this nature of wanting to conquer more stations brought them in conflict with the Fourth Reich. The Reich have almost the same fascist ideas as the Third Reich in the sense that they want purity amongst their citizens. They are also not very cool individuals in general. But we can use this war in our favor. You see, in order to continue our journey, we must also make our way through the Nazi base, so Andrew the blacksmith hides us in a cart that is going to the front lines of this conflict. And when I'm saying the front lines, I really mean the front lines because these guys aren't messing around. Artyom gets captured by 2 Nazis, but we are saved from execution just in time by 2 rangers called Ullman and Pavel. We show them Hunter's dog tags and they understand the importance of our mission, so they split up in order to get us to police. Pavel will come with us and Ullman will finish their mission. What comes next is the most fun part of gameplay in the game because as we try to make our way through the Nazi lines, we get discovered and we basically get unlimited ammo to send them to hell. Unfortunately, Pavel is killed while we try and escape, and Artyom ends up at a station called Hall Station. They ask us to help them repel a Nozalis attack, but we fail and the monsters get through our defenses. We escape and we also find a little boy that we reunite with his family. After this we get to the surface again and we end up in a Nazi base called Black Station. And Black Station is where I feel the poor level design of this game really shows because it's basically a maze that you have to get through, and I spent more time than I needed to find the right path, but it is what it is. And I'm not saying that this game would need a minimap or anything like that. No, I actually like when games don't hold your hand, but this was too much. After we finally get through Black Station, we meet with Ullman and we reach Polis. And you can really see why Polis is considered the capital of the metro system, because it's really impressive. In the end, we finally meet Miller, the man Hunter told us to find. And you would think that the job is finally done and we would get the help we need. Well, no, because the people of Polis refuse to send us any help. but still Miller is willing to help us, so he tells us about a secret facility called D6 where we might find working missiles so that we can use them to destroy the black ones. D6 is an actual Russian secret metro station that was built by the KGB at the orders of Stalin. But the only problem is that D6 is a secret base, so no one knows where it is. But luckily, Polis is the station under the Moscow State Library that also houses the secret military archives, so there's a pretty good chance we could find something that would tell us where D6 is there. We meet with Colonel Miller at the library, but after one of his men is injured by a demon, he is forced to leave us to continue our search for the documents alone. Now, that wouldn't be a problem in general, but the library is inhabited by a unique group of monsters called the Librarians. These monsters are very powerful, and when Miller tells us about them, he really emphasizes on the fact that if we let them out of our sight, we are dead. And I say let them out of our sight because if you look them in the eyes, they would just turn around and leave you alone. But to be honest, that really didn't work for me, and I just spent the entire way to the documents just running from them. But in the end, we do find the documents that will lead us to the location of D6. After this, the Rangers transport us to the only known surface outpost that they use as a base. This base is located in an old church, and I have to say that the developers paid so much attention to detail in this church. And not only in this church, but the game in general. Like, I'm from Eastern Europe, not from Russia, but I could see things that are familiar to me throughout the whole game, like these rugs that every Eastern European has seen at least once in their lives. And this attention to detail is actually amazing. You can really see the developers cared about this project. In the church we also meet Khan again, and he tells us that maybe we shouldn't kill the Dark Ones, but we don't listen, and together with a group of Rangers we set out for D6. And you can tell shit is about to go down in a game when the developers give you free weapons and ammo. And during our journey towards D6, something weird happens. Artyom begins to have visions from the Dark Ones again, but this time they come with a message of peace. But nonetheless, we march on until we reach D6. This facility is gigantic, and there are signs that there might be a way to give power to the whole base. Artyom makes his way to the control room, and the Rangers find out that there are still missiles that we can fire. The only problem is that we must restore power to the facility, and in order to do that we must make our way to the basement where the reactor is. When we get there with Miller, we see the most disgusting thing in the whole game. There is this biomass that is growing on top of the reactor, and it's shooting weird orbs at us. After Artyom uses a crane to activate the rods of the reactor, we get power in the whole station. The missiles are active, but now we must make our way to a Stankino tower in order to manually aim the missiles because the targeting system in D6 is broken. And this is where the opening sequence of the game takes place before we began our journey 8 days ago. Even though we see this scene at the beginning as well, I decided to go in chronological order to make things easier to understand. We get attacked by a horde of Nosalises, but us and Miller manage to make our way into the tower and start climbing it. About halfway through the climb, Miller is injured, so we are forced to scale the last part alone. When we get to the top, we set up the targeting system, but before launching the missiles, the Dark Ones make one final attempt at stopping us. They get into our head and force us to go through the depths of our mind, while they keep saying that they want peace. But in the end, Hunter shows up and hands us a revolver that we used to kill the Dark One that was hunting us. After this, we see the missiles launch and the home of the Dark Ones is destroyed. But now let's talk a bit about what this ending means, because many people call it the bad ending. Yes, the bad one, because there is another ending where we spare the Dark Ones, but that is not the canon ending, so we won't talk about it. From the perspective of the first game, I don't think that the canon ending is the bad one. And remember, we are talking about it from the perspective of Metro 2033 alone. The reason I say it doesn't seem to be the bad one is because after all the Dark Ones were attacking our people and killing them. So the reason we did all we did throughout the game was to save our station, and in the end we succeeded. It is clear that the Dark Ones have a consciousness, but even though in the end they were saying that they wanted peace, they didn't show much for it. So that's why I say I don't think this ending is that bad, but we will discuss this again in the future videos where we will analyze the Metro games. Metro 2033 ends with Artyom watching the destruction he caused, and then the credits roll. Metro Last Light is a brilliant sequel to Metro 2033. It improves on multiple levels, including the story and the graphics, and provides more engaging gameplay. As in the last part, we'll only be discussing the canon ending. Enjoy! The game starts 1 year after the events of the last game, 1 year after the bombing of the home of the Dark Ones. Artyom is now a member of the Rangers and is living in D6, which the Order transformed into their base. We are awakened by Khan, who tells Artyom that he spotted a single survivor of the Dark Ones while he was on the surface. He tells us that it's crucial we make peace with this survivor because it was a mistake that we destroyed them. He believes that this final Dark One is the key to the survival of humanity. In a meeting with Miller, Khan tells him about the Dark One, but Miller doesn't see things as he does, so he sends us and his daughter Anna to kill this final Dark One. While we head to the surface, we hear of a ranger called Lesnitsky that is missing and that no one knows what happened to him. While we make our way to the surface, Anna keeps calling Artyom Little Rabbit for no apparent reason. This isn't connected to the story in any way, I just found it weird and annoying. After all, Artyom is the furthest thing away from a scared little rabbit, but anyway. We make our way to the botanical gardens, the former home of the Dark Ones, and we get to see the destruction we caused because everything has been turned to ash. After a little while, Artyom sees the final surviving Dark One, and it's a child. A primary school Dark One, that's all that's left of an entire species. We try to capture it, but after a game of cat and mouse, we, as well as the Dark One, get captured by the Fourth Reich. We wake up in a prison, and we get to see the obsession for perfection that the Reich has that I mentioned in the last video. Artyom and this other prisoner, who is a soldier of the Red Line, the communists of the Metro, narrowly escape execution and find a way to escape their cells. Pavel, the Red Line soldier, is seemingly very friendly, and Artyom really seems to trust him, even saving him from being hanged by the Nazis. Well, it turns out that Pavel is in fact a high-level communist officer, and after we make our way to the safety of the Red Line, he betrays us, and we end up in captivity again, but this time at the hands of the commies. We get interrogated by the Red Line leader, Maxim Moskvin, and the head of intelligence, General Korbut. Even though Maxim is the official leader of the Red Line, General Korbut has more power than him because he helped Maxim kill his own brother, the former leader of the Red Line, to gain power. Because he is the one who helped him rise to power, he basically has him in his pocket. Remember in the last episode when I said that the Red Line wanted to conquer the Metro Line? Well, before Artyom blew up the Dark Ones, Korbut wanted to domesticate one of them and use it as a weapon against the other lines. So naturally, this last Dark One is of very high importance to him, that's why he sent Pavel after him. After we escape with the help of the son of Maxim, who is strongly against the actions of his father, we learn of a plan that Korbut has, but we don't know exactly the details for now. We make our way out of the communist line, and by absolute chance we meet Andrew the blacksmith. He is on the run from the communists because of their crackdown on smugglers. He is helping other refugees make their way to Hansa from the Red Line and the Fourth Reich. Hansa is the biggest confederation of the Metro lines. They are more of a trading alliance, even though in the past they fought a war with the Red Line, a war that they won. Andrew the blacksmith helps us get a message to Miller in which we tell him that we are alive and we mean to continue our mission to find the Dark One. He also gifts us this car so that we can reach Venice faster. Venice is a unique station because it's situated on an island in the underground. We managed to get there with the help of a fisherman that we find in an abandoned metro line. In Venice, we also find Pavel that is leading a team of Red Line soldiers to retake the Dark One that is heading to some place called Oktobriskaya. After he tells us this, unfortunately Pavel manages to escape. Luckily, one of the residents of Venice tells us about a ranger outpost located in a church somewhat close nearby. This is not the same church outpost from the first game, so I find it a bit weird that this one is also a church, but fair enough. In order to get there, we must cross a swamp, and after we do this, we have a boss fight with a giant mutated shrimp. Yes, this game introduces the concept of boss fights, and honestly, they are really fun, even though most of them are the same in terms of gameplay. After this, we regroup with the rangers at the church, including Anna, who feels really bad she abandoned us at the botanical gardens. But unfortunately, this reunion doesn't last too long, because Lesnitsky, the ranger that I mentioned earlier, together with a group of Red Line soldiers, lead an attack on the outpost, an attack that kills everybody except Artyom and Anna, but they take Anna alive while they leave us for dead. But luckily we ain't dead yet, so after we make our way through what appears to be an underground abandoned city and another boss fight, we make our way to a station within Hansa. Anna is also located at this station, but we also see Red Line soldiers executing residents of the station because they are infected with some sort of disease. So let's take a detour from the story for a while to understand what is going on. It turns out that the reason Lesnitsky left the Rangers is because he was a Red Line spy that was sent to D6 to recover a bioweapon. D6 was a war facility before the fallout, and the Russian government was developing a bioweapon based on an Ebola strain there. What is special about this weapon is that it's lethal for a short period of time, and after that it becomes harmless. This means that you can unleash it in a station, for example, wait for everybody to die, and then send in your men to capture it without any losses. It turns out Korbut learned of this weapon, and after the Dark Ones were seemingly destroyed, this was the next best thing in order to help him conquer the whole metro. The reason they unleashed it into this innocent metro station is because they wanted to test it. With all this information in mind, let's get back to the story. After we see the destruction the Red Line caused in the station, we find Anna. She is being held at gunpoint by Lesnitsky, and he says that if we take off our mask, he will let her go. If you don't want to take off your mask and instead want to shoot him, the same thing happens, and you and Anna are now gasping for air because of the fire that was started by the Red Line to burn the bodies in the base. By a miracle, the two make their way to a Hansa base, but now they are both scared that they might be infected by the bioweapon. Seeing that they might die, they decide to have some spicy time, and in the bad ending we see that this led to a child, but that's irrelevant for now. After they get examined by a doctor, it seems that they are both fine, and Artyom finds Khan again. They head to a place called the River of Fate that seemingly has supernatural powers and will transport them to the Dark One's location. Now I don't know exactly how this River of Fate works because it appears to have the power to transport them back in the past because we see the moment Artyom destroyed the Dark One's home, but what is clear is that the river actually sends them close to the baby Dark One's location. He's being transported on a train, and after we board it, we finally get our hands on the Dark One. And now I think it's a great time to discuss Artyom's history with the Dark Ones. When Artyom was a little kid, he and a couple of friends managed to open the doors to the station close to the botanical gardens, where the home of the Dark Ones was. They get attacked by monsters, but a Dark One comes and rescues them. Why would a hostile creature save a few human children? Well, because the Dark Ones weren't evil. They were just the next step in evolution. So the first game intentionally makes you believe that the Dark Ones were hostile when they weren't. That's why I said in the last Metro video we will discuss the Metro 2033 ending again. The Dark Ones also have the ability to communicate with humans through psychic ability. So when at the ending of the previous game they said they wanted peace, they really meant it. Because Artyom was the first human they encountered, they viewed him sort of as a chosen one that would unite their species, but in the end he was the reason they almost went extinct. And I say almost because there is a group of them hibernating under D6, so it's possible they were a species created before the war that ended up thriving in the irradiated environment from the surface. Khan also calls them the last angels, sent to save them, and in a way he's right, but we'll see that later. The Dark One and Artyom now must make their way to Polis because there is a peace treaty being negotiated between Hansa and the Red Line. But in reality, the Red Line would betray the treaty and release the virus in the whole metro. And this is where the Dark One's ability to show people's thoughts to others comes in handy. So we make a deal with him. We help him get as close to D6 as possible, and he helps us show the real intentions of the Red Line. In order to get to Polis, we must traverse the surface again. And this part of the game was my favorite because you really begin to form a connection with the Dark One. Artyom even says at one point that he finds it hard to believe that this little guy is so pure it doesn't even consider violence, because remember, the Dark Ones can read someone's mind, so he knows that we are the ones responsible for the death of his kind. Yet, even so, he doesn't bear any resentment towards us. He even begins to help us and tries to learn more about our civilization, and you can see him during our journey learning new words and even human concepts such as forgiveness if you let Pavel live. He can also see if a person or a beast is hostile, and if it's not, he will ask you not to kill it, because whether Artyom likes it or not, they are part of the same earth together now. Plus, the first time I saw him wearing clothes, I really felt bad for killing them in the first game. Once we make our way to Polis, he reveals to everybody the Red Line's plan, and Moskvin tells everybody the truth. We also learn that the Red Line are on their way to attack D6, so all the Rangers make their way towards the base. When we get there, Miller gives off a really good speech, and this moment really got stuck in my mind. After this, the Red Line attacks, and a fierce battle rages on. They throw everything at us, but as Miller puts it, every Ranger is worth 5 of them. But even so, eventually we get overrun. Before the battle, Miller had rigged the whole base with explosives, and he tells us that if we lose, it is crucial that we blow ourselves up together with the communists, because if they got their hands on D6, the metro will surely fall in their grasp. Now, with almost every Ranger dead or wounded, it's Artyom's task to set the explosives to blow. But if you made the right choices during the game, the little Dark One will show up with his brothers and will stop you from doing that and will kill the Red Ones. At the end of the game, we find the fates of our friends. Colonel Miller is now restrained to a wheelchair, but becomes the head of security in Polis. Ullman, along with most of the Rangers, died in the battle, and Khan just mysteriously vanished. And this only amplifies the mysterious nature of Khan that we see in the games. The Dark Ones and humanity finally make peace, but they leave because they feel it's in the best interest of both species. The credits then roll, and Metro Last Light is done. Metro Exodus is one of the best games I've ever played. Everything from the story to the characters and the world is amazing, and it really brings a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. Enjoy! The game starts 1 year after the battle for D6, and we see a cutscene in which Artyom tells us of a dream of his. A dream to find people living outside Moscow, because there is no way only in Moscow people manage to survive the nuclear war. In search of his dream, Artyom takes frequent trips to the surface with a radio to search for other settlements or humans outside Moscow, transmitting something over the radio. But these trips that he is taking are becoming more and more dangerous, and eventually, after narrowly escaping death, Anna, who is now his wife, and Colonel Miller try to persuade him to give up because these trips are affecting more people than he realizes. Artyom agrees, but he wants to go on one final mission, and Anna decides to go with him to make sure everything goes smoothly, but then the unexpected happens. They see a train running through the ruins of Moscow. Naturally, they are stunned, but they decide to follow it to see where it's going and who's on board. They get intercepted by a car they think it's from the Rangers, but it's from Hansa, and they get captured. Inside the car there are also 2 people from a village outside Moscow, so Artyom's theory that there are people out there living their lives is correct. The car takes a sudden stop near the outskirts of Moscow, and then the Hansa soldiers take the people from the village outside the car and they prepare to execute them, but Artyom tries to help them. Unfortunately, he fails, and all of them, including Artyom, get shot. The only reason he lived is because Hunter's medallion that he got in the first game stopped the bullet. The Hansa soldiers take Anna captive and Artyom goes after them, making his way into a huge base. Inside he meets a man called Yermak, who is the train conductor. He tells Artyom that he will help him and together they find Anna. They also find the radio waves jammer that the Hansa soldiers used to stop anyone from contacting Moscow, and after they destroy it, they see radio signals from all around the world. After this, the three of them steal the train, but they get captured by Hansa soldiers, but the soldiers surrender when the Rangers show up. Because they know too much, Hansa sends another train after them, but after Artyom blows it up, they lose their pursuit. Alright, that might have been a lot to take in, so let's take a moment to understand what is going on. Hansa was jamming the communications in Moscow because they believed that large parts of the country were being occupied by NATO forces, so they jammed the communications so that NATO would think no one survived in Moscow and that way they wouldn't attack again. This is obviously not true because in a nuclear war no one wins, so they isolated themselves from the world for 20 years for basically nothing. We learn all this from Miller, who learned this only 6 months ago. So this is clearly a very highly kept secret, seeing that not even the commander of the Rangers knew until a few months back. That's why they executed the travelers that came from outside Moscow, because they believed they were NATO spies, which is again obviously not true. Miller also tells us about something called the ARC project, a safe haven created by the former leaders of Russia in the Yamantau region. Seeing that they can't go back to Moscow because they would be executed, they all agree to move onward towards the Ark. But before that, they named the train Aurora after a Roman goddess. After about 700 kilometers, they reach a bridge over the Volga River, but as they are about to cross it, they get attacked by some bandits. Everyone is fine, but the bandits damage the boiler on the Aurora, so they need to stop to give Yermak some time to repair it. Over in the distance, the group could see a church that rang its bells when the train arrived, so Artyom and Anna go there to check it out. And here you can see for the first time how this game is different from the others, because even though it still has a linear story, the world is more open and you can explore more. And this is what I like most about the game. The fact that you can explore the environment, because the game looks so good and it's so immersive that I found myself wanting more to explore, and more often than not I would abandon the main story to just explore the different regions our journey takes us through. When we get to the church, we find that a cult that worships a giant mutated fish operates there. This cult is led by a man called Silencius, and the base idea of his teachings is that we should be anti-technology. Think of him sort of as the post-apocalyptic Unabomber minus the bombing, which would kinda make him just the Una. When we get inside the church, the cultists trap us and they call a group of bandits to kill us. Trapped in the church are also Katya and her daughter Nastasia. They give us information about the men that control the bridge that we need to cross, and we tell them to make their way to the train. We also manage to escape the church, and then we all regroup at the Aurora. Miller keeps asking Katya if she knows anything about NATO occupation forces, because he keeps believing the lie that he was told by Hansa. Katya naturally says she doesn't know anything, but she mentions that a mechanic lives in a nearby port. This mechanic would be very helpful because remember, we need to fix the Aurora, so Artyom's next task is to find him and convince him to join us. We get there and we meet Crest, and he doesn't need much convincing to get him to join us because there's nothing to do on the Volga, so we send him to the Aurora. When we leave the port, Miller tells us that Anna went to investigate some antennas, but she lost contact with the group. Seeing that her last known location was close to us, we go there to try and find her. We end up in a bunker and we find Anna unconscious because she inhaled some toxic gas. Keep this in mind because it will play a bigger role later in the story, but we get her out and we return to the Aurora. This game also has a day and night cycle, and across the map you can find these safe zones that serve sort of like a hub area because you can sleep there, but most importantly, these places have workbenches where you can equip and craft weapons and bullets. This game changed a lot from the others in the way that you can no longer buy weapons and ammo, but now you must gather crafting ingredients throughout the map, then make your way to one of these workbenches and craft what you need. You also have the ability to craft medkits and other basic stuff on the go because you have this portable workbench, but you can't make everything you need using this one. The game also introduces small side quests, as when we get back to the Aurora, members of our crew will ask us to fetch some items such as a guitar and a teddy bear for Anastasia. But now I realize that I didn't really explain who the members of the Aurora are, and seeing that they play a big part in the game, we should discuss them. The ones you should know so far are Miller, Artyom and Anna, so we won't talk too much about them. One thing to mention is that after Miller lost his legs in the battle for D6, he got these really cool prosthetic legs. The first member of the crew is Stepan. He is a heavy weapon specialist and he was also part of the battle for D6. Next up we have Idiot, who is Miller's right hand man. I don't know why he is nicknamed Idiot, but we move on. The Spartan that comes up next is the most interesting out of them all in my opinion. His name is Sam and he is a US Marine. He was part of the soldiers stationed at the US Embassy in Moscow and he was saved by Miller from a mob that wanted to lynch him. He also got his own DLC, but we'll discuss the DLCs for this game later on. Duke is the youngest member of the crew and he is described as the most reckless out of them all. Alyosha is the first scout of the group and he was previously a police guard. Damir is the medic and he was born in Kazakhstan, and this detail will play a part later on in the story. And lastly we have Tokarev, who is the weapons expert and the man that would sometimes give us upgrades for our weapons. With all this in mind, let's get back to the story. When we get back to the Aurora, Miller argues with Stefan because he doesn't want to let Katya and Anastasia come with us because the journey would be too dangerous. After a bit of convincing, Miller finally agrees, but now we must get some train cars because there isn't enough space for all of us on the train. Luckily, there is an old train depot nearby where Crest tells us that we would find what we need. We make our way to the abandoned building, and after a fight with these new enemies the game introduces that are basically zombies, and after a close encounter with the fish that the cult in the church worshipped, we get the train car and we get back to the Aurora. Crest and Yermak repair the train, so we are ready to set out, but now we need to find a way to cross the bridge without getting shot. Crest tells us about some smugglers that are set to come to resupply the bridge outpost, so we devise a plan to possess them and then open the gate of the outpost for the Aurora to pass. We take a squad of rangers to where the smugglers disembark and we slowly take them out and steal their boat, then Artyom and Duke make their way to the bridge. Silencius is preaching to the guards of the outpost so we can easily sneak past them. We reach Silencius and we make a deal with him to let us pass. He opens the gates and we and Duke jump on the Aurora, so now we have free passage to the Yamantau region where the Ark is. After a few days on the road, Miller tells Artyom that he managed to talk with the Ark project and he will play the conversation he had with them. While we listen to it, it's very clear that the people we talk to don't want to actually help us and in fact want to ambush us somehow, because they ask questions like how many of us are there and what is our training and stuff like that. But Miller didn't see through those lies because he was blinded by the fact that the voice he was talking to referred to himself as the defense minister, and Miller, who is a career soldier from before the war, viewed this as a great honor, and you can really hear in his voice that he is very proud to have talked to such important people. So because we didn't see this trap, we move onwards towards Yamantau. When we get there, the region is pretty desolate, which again is a sign that something isn't right, but we move ahead anyway. Miller, Artyom, Anna, Sam, Crest and Stepan make their way to a huge bunker embedded in the mountain. When we make our way inside, Artyom, Miller and Anna go to meet the leaders while the other rangers guard the train cart. But to no one's surprise, When we get to the command center, we get captured, and it's revealed that the people that run the facility are in fact cannibals that lead people to the base in order to eat them. They take Anna away to have her examined by a doctor because she has a weird cough, and the rest of them prepare to eat us and Miller. But Sam and Stepan come to our rescue. They set us free, and we begin to fight our way through the bunker to find Anna. While we fight, we can really see how many cannibals there are because they just don't stop coming. In the end, we find Anna and the doctor, and we set her free, and she kills the doctor right before he was about to say something. Also keep this in mind for later on. After this, we escape the bunker, and we make our way back to the Aurora, and we begin another journey. After a month or so, we reach the desert near the Caspian Sea, and we are forced to stop because we are running low on supplies and fuel. Nearby to where we stopped, we can see that there are people, so we begin to investigate if they are friendly or not. In this area there is also a satellite base from before the war that would contain maps that would indicate the level of radiation in different areas, maps that would help us find a habitable spot way faster. So we have our objectives clear as day: find water and fuel and get those maps. While we explore the shores of the Caspian Sea, it doesn't take too long to realize that the area is being controlled by some slave owners called the Munai Bailer, which roughly translates to oil drillers. They are former workers of a oil company that operated on the Caspian Sea, and after the war they got their hands on large quantities of oil that they used to gain power and enslave the natives of the area, natives that Damir calls his people because remember, he is of Kazakhstani origin. They are led by a man called the Baron that we can hear often over the radio. This Baron also invented some sort of religion that worships the holy flame. Using this holy flame, the Munai Bailer managed to brainwash the slaves to the extent that they don't consider themselves human anymore. Located in the area, there is also a woman called Jewel that seems to be one of the last locals not enslaved by the Munai Bailer. Miller tells us to go help her because the lighthouse where she has her base is being attacked by the slavers. In return, she said she will guide us to the satellite facility because her mother used to work there and she got inside before trying to find out what happened to her. We go to the lighthouse and we kill her attackers, and then we make our way to the satellite facility. Before we go inside, Jewel asks us to find what happened to her mother. After we fight through those annoying spider bugs, we find her mother and we get a picture of her family. We also find the maps we were looking for. After this, we make our way to where we set camp and we talk to Miller. He tells us that the Baron controls all the drinking water in the region and that he spoke to him, but his terms to give us some water were unacceptable, so we must find a way to get some. Damir found out that all the water comes from a place called the Oasis, so the two of us make our way to this oasis. Artyom manages to open the gate to the complex and the two of them steal a truck full of water. On the way back, Artyom falls asleep, but he is awakened by gunfire. The Aurora is being attacked by the slavers. We fight them off, and now the final thing we need to get is the fuel for the train. The only place we can get that is from the oil rig that the Baron's men use as their base. Artyom, Jewel and Damir storm the base, and after a fight with the Baron that ends up in his death, Artyom and Damir manage to open the gates of the base and leave with the fuel. Jewel thanks us that we helped her so much in setting her people free, and we make our way to the Aurora and we begin to go eastward again. After a talk with Anna regarding her cough, we go to celebrate Stepan and Katya's wedding, but during the celebration this happens.
Happy. Oh, and Gorka! Gorka! Gorka!
Anna begins coughing blood and she tells us that because she inhaled the toxic gas in the bunker on the Volga, her lungs are collapsing. This is what the doctor in the bunker in Yamantau was about to say before Anna killed him. After this, Artyom, Miller and Katya talk about what to do, and Katya tells about an experimental drug used to cure lung problems her mother told her about. She says she doesn't remember the name right now, but she is sure it was produced in the city of Novosibirsk. In the meantime, Miller found what seems a habitable place using the maps we recovered from the satellite facility. This place is located in the Taiga region of Russia. There is still hope that the clean air from this region would help Anna recover without the medicine, so Artyom and Alyosha begin scouting the area. We take the rail cart, but the train tracks can't hold our weight and we crash in the river. Fortunately, a local named Olga saves us and tells us to hide. The area is inhabited by two groups, the pioneers and the pirates. In the Taiga region, there was a campsite and a school, and when the war broke out, the leader of the camp taught the children how to survive and they formed a community. But after some time, the community divided into the two groups I mentioned earlier. Even though they are separate now, they still kind of worship the leader of the camp that taught them everything, naming him the teacher. After Artyom recovers, he finds a crossbow, and after sneaking past a group of pirates and a mutated bear like the one from Metro Last Light, he gets caught in a hunting net. The pirates come to kill him, but he is saved by the giant bear that the locals call the Master of the Forest. He manages to escape and make his way to a pioneer camp where he learns Alyosha was captured and he awaits trial. After this, he makes his way to a church on a cliffside where the teacher is buried, and there he meets Olga, the woman that saved him earlier. She is the leader of the pioneers, and she tells Artyom she freed Alyosha and she took him up to a nearby dam. She tells us to make our way there as well. On the way, we meet the Admiral. He was the former leader of the pirates, but now he is just a crippled and insane old man. Anyway, we make our way through some tunnels and we meet with Alyosha that tells us we can't inhabit this zone because the dam is cracked and soon the whole valley will be flooded. After this, we have another fight with the bear, but this time we kill it. Then Olga shows up and she and Alyosha have a moment. He tells her to get her people out of the valley, then we zipline to the Aurora. Unfortunately, we have bad news awaiting. Anna's state is deteriorating and at this pace she won't last long. Fortunately, Nastasia found the name of the medicine that could help her. It was being produced in Novosibirsk at a place called the Institute. So we set out for the city. On the way, we learned that Novosibirsk has an interesting nickname, the Dead City. The reason for this is because the radiation levels in the city are 8 times the ones in Moscow, rendering the city very dangerous. Because of this, whoever goes in there needs some protective suits. Unfortunately, Yermak has enough material for only 2, one for Artyom and one for Miller. They are the ones that should go because, as Miller puts it, they are responsible for the state Anna is in. Artyom is guilty because they left Moscow because of him and his dream, and Miller is guilty because he was the one who sent Anna to investigate the antennas that led her to falling into the bunker. So they suit up and take the car into the ruins of the dead city. After a while they make their way into the metro system where they find a little kid named Kirill. On the way to Kirill, they saw signs of a war being fought in the underground because there are bodies everywhere. We can learn what happened through the first DLC of this game called The Two Colonels. The DLC follows Kirill's father, Colonel Kolebnikov, during the downfall of the station. The DLC also makes parallels between Miller and Kolebnikov, moving from the present day into the past. The reason the war broke out in the metro of Novosibirsk is because of a drug called the green stuff. It still amazes me that they just couldn't find a name for it and just called it the green stuff, but what this drug does, it improves resistance to radiation. And in a city so irradiated such as Novosibirsk, it's natural that it became an important resource. The war broke out because the leadership started to confiscate the green stuff from the people because they needed it to escape the city. The people revolted and the only survivors were Kirill and his father. In an attempt to find a habitable place for the both of them, Colonel Kolebnikov made his way to a nearby SATCOM center to find maps of the radiation level, but succumbed to the radiation. This is one of the best DLCs I've played because of the story and the ideas that it touches, such as morality and the truth. Plus the ending sequence where Miller gives a monologue on how much he loves Anna and Artyom nearly made me cry. But let's get back to the main story. Kirill tells Artyom where to find the institute and Miller where to find the SATCOM center where his father went after the maps. He also gives them one vial of this green stuff. So Artyom will make his way to the institute to find the medicine for Anna, and Miller will go to the SATCOM center to find the maps. During his trip to the institute, Artyom begins having visions that make him push onward even though the radiation is killing him. Many people believe that these visions were induced by the little dark one from the last game because we can actually see him following us. So it's nice to think that the dark one we saved actually cares for us. When we get to the institute, we discover that these mutated gorillas live there. These might be the creepiest enemies in the whole series because they communicate telepathically and appear to know how to talk. After we sneak past them, and after having some more visions that make us push further, we finally find the medicine. But right as we are about to leave, we get attacked by one of these gorillas and we fall off the roof. As everything seems lost, Miller shows up and gives us his shot of the green stuff, basically dooming himself to save us. He gets us in the car and we find Kirill and we make our way to the Aurora. We pass out, but we are awakened by Kirill, who tries to drive the car. We get up and we see Miller dead in his seat. We pick up the wheel and we get to the train where we pass out. The whole crew gives us a blood transfusion because our blood is so irradiated it will kill us. During this we pass out and we see Miller talking to us. He says that he loved us like his son and he is glad that we are with Anna. He shows us the place that he found to be habitable and his final wish is to be buried near Lake Baikal. We wake up and everything is fine. The game ends with Miller's funeral and Artyom becoming the new leader of the Spartans. The story of this game is brilliant. If you watched so far, I would still recommend playing the game because it's an experience you won't forget. Metro Exodus has one final piece of content, and namely a DLC called Sam's Story. This DLC follows Sam, the Marine from our group, in his journey after the main game. He wants to find a way to go back home to San Francisco. This DLC is also amazing, play it if you didn't. But this brings us to the end of the video. If you watched so far, thank you. I hope something from what I had to say was interesting to you. I don't know exactly what the next video will be, but I will see you soon. Goodbye.